object-oriented programming revolves around working with data. And often we'll read in external data, maybe from a text file, which is what we're going to look at today. It might come from a database. It might come from a web service that's providing data from the cloud. But we'll take that data and read it into a list of objects, and those objects are created using object-oriented programming. So we'll create a class, and this is often referred to as modeling our data. So we'll create a model, which is a class in this case Python, but we do the same thing in other languages as well. So to give you an idea, let's say we have a client who is a philatelist, a stamp collector, and they would like a program that would track all of their stamps that they have acquired, and to be able to run some reports on those stamps and be able to add stamps and remove stamps from their collection in terms of this application. We can think of a lot of different attributes for the various stamps that they would have, and one of those is the Scott number. Scott is a publishing company that publishes a catalog of stamp values, and every stamp that comes out, they assign a unique identifier to that stamp that can easily be looked up in a catalog as far as the value, but it's also what people use when they auction off stamps at places like eBay or even face-to-face auctions. We'll refer to stamps by that Scott number. So every stamp, of course, is issued from a nation, has a description, it's issued in a year, has a color or maybe a mixture of colors, has a face value, what's the value of that stamp, putting it in postage, and then is that stamp used or mint? And we'll look at that as a true or false value. So a false value would be it's used or canceled. Has the stamp been hinged or not? And there are various letters that are used to represent the hinge state of a stamp, NH being never hinged, but there's also H for hinged, or LH for light hinged, or HR for hinged remnant. And then what's the grade? These can be graded by specialists in the field in terms of what's their quality. So you might have S for superb, or VF for very fine, or F for fine. And then what's the current value of that stamp? Those are the types of things that this client of ours would like to have in the database. So I set this up in Excel with those exact fields: the Scott number, the nation, the description, the year it was issued, the color or colors, the face value of the stamp, a Boolean value of true or false, whether it's mint or not, the hinge status, the grade, and then finally the value current as a floating expression. And then I exported that out as a tab delimited file. We're going to take that tab delimited file and read it into a Python program and storing each record, each stamp that's represented here as an object in a list. And we're going to create that object in a new class that we'll develop, and then we'll look at how to use that list as we read those objects in and run some reports, but also to be able to add items to our data file and remove items from the data file. So let's go over to Python. So I created a Python file called stamps.py. It contains a class that I created simply called stamp, and I use that then in our main program. What the main program does is it reads in that data file I just showed you as a tab delimited file and creates an instance of each stamp in a list that I've named collection, and then I can manipulate the stamps in that collection. So I can add a new stamp, I can display the collection, I can display all the non-mint canceled, because this particular stamp collector wants to replace some of their used stamps, ideally with mint stamps. They'd like to have a report to be able to run those and see what they have that's currently canceled in their collection. I can remove a stamp, maybe one is sold, show the stamps from a specific year, and then I can display this particular menu, and I can exit out of this by clicking X, and I forgot to put that in the menu here. So X is how we would exit out. So we're asking for a menu choice. I'm just going to do D to display the stamp collection so you can see the data that's read in. And in our class, I've set up a dunder method for string to display the item of each stamp in terms of the Scott number, the year, the description, which includes the color, and then the condition, which includes whether it's mint, the hinge status, and the grade, and then the current value. I have my program separate all the US stamps And then the world stamps are listed alphabetically by country. The stamps are organized by the Scott number as well. So airmail stamps in US start with the letter C. Normal stamps are just a number. In some cases, there's some variations where there might be a letter after the number. And then finally, I want to know what the value is of the US collection, what the value is of the world collection, and then the sum of those two together. That's all generated when we choose to display the collection. Now, if I want to see just those that aren't in mint condition, also there's a few here that say used. So I'm going to do an N, and I get a report of the stamps in used or canceled condition and list those stamps where that is the case. If I want to see the menu again, I can press the question mark. And maybe I want to see the stamps from a specific year, so I can press Y as my menu choice. And I want to see all the stamps from 1930. And there are the stamps in the collection that are from the year 1930. So let's add a stamp. If I scroll back up, you'll see that there were 30 records, 30 stamps in our list. So we're going to add a stamp. First thing we're asked is the Scott number. Our number in this case is going to be 0002. I used 4 numbers so everything would line up correctly for our Scott numbers. Technically, this is Scott number 2. So this was the second stamp ever issued by the United States. Now, for entering the nation, I made this so that since most of the stamps were going to be US stamps, they didn't have to specify nation, just leave it blank and it will put US in automatically. Enter the stamp description. Well, this is a stamp of George Washington. The year of issue was 1847. Color is black. The face value, it was a 10-cent stamp, so 0.10. Mint condition, no. Hinged, I'm going to say yes, it was hinged. I'm going to do H. Grade will be fine. And then it's worth about $1,900. It gives me a summary of what I entered and said, is it okay to add this to the collection, yes or no? So if you made a mistake, you could cancel out and come back and fix it. I'm going to say yes, let's add it to the collection. And I could then add another stamp. So maybe I have a bunch of stamps I want to add in. In this case, I'm just going to say no. And let's display our stamps. And so now in our stamps, you'll see that we have the Scott number 2, 1847, 10-cent George Washington stamp. It's black. It's in used condition, hinged, fair, and worth $1,900. Now I'm going to exit out of the program. And I'm going to run my Python program again. Notice this time there are 31 records that were read in. So that George Washington's Scott number 2 that I added in is now part of that text file. We talked about that as being data persistence. We're persisting our data from session to session. We're simply saving our data for the next time. Now what if I want to remove something? Let's say we have sold this 0312 James Madison stamp. It's dark blue, valued at $225. So let's say I've sold that to a fellow collector. I can press R to remove, enter the full Scott number, so 0312, and it says it found it. It gives me a summary of that stamp and says, are you sure you want to remove the stamp? Now if I say no, then nothing will happen. But if I say yes, then I'm told that stamp has been removed. And again, if I display, it is no longer in the display. We see 313, but not 312. And once again, if I exit and then come back in and run the program, display the stamps. So now we're down to 30 records again. So I'm going to display my stamp collection. And here, notice that 312 is no longer there. So it's been removed, and that removal has persisted from session to session. I'm going to exit out of my program And then the next lesson, we'll take a look at the code that I wrote to make this all work. If you just jumped into this video and haven't seen the prior videos to this, I invite you to check out my Python playlist of videos. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos that I create, you can click my picture up in the top right and subscribe to the channel.